Welcome to the latest episode of Gallivanting-About, and thanks for tuning in. I go to the Fleet Air Arm Museum at the Royal Navy Air Station Yeovilton, where I see some great machines. There's a helicopter windscreen with a bullet hole in it, and then my cousin sends me a photo of the actual helicopter in the Falklands. The 70s aircraft carrier experience was great, and the holograms were amazing. The next stop after work was Charlestown in Cornwall, and then after more work, a stay at the Jamaica Inn. There was a great collection of different aircraft at the museum, and also lots of other stuff to do with the Navy as well, as you'll see later in the video. You can also go inside some of the machines, and I found that really interesting. Well, the whole thing interesting. There's also an observation point where you can see out to the airfield itself, which would be great if there was, especially on a day when something was going on. That would have been fantastic. And as I said at the beginning, there was a cabinet with a windscreen in it with a bullet hole in it that had happened actually in the Falklands, and then my cousin sent me an actual picture. In actual fact, the bullet hole was projected from the inside of the aircraft. I've been on the Concords before, one at Manchester Airport and the one at Duxford, but it's always great to see it and interesting to realise how great that technology was at the time. The 70s aircraft carrier experience was fantastic because it covered the outside on the flight deck, and the inside also, and it was really interesting.
To restore international control over the Suez Canal and bring an end to the Suez crisis. In the world's first helicopter for the Sun campaign, 450 Royal Marine commanders were landed in HMS Theseus and HMS Ocean.
We control the airspace around the Caribbean. These days, most of this work is done by air traffic controllers, but at the time of the Isle of Royal, we worked all up to someone like myself and the logger, who kept a record of everything going on. Now we have an air traffic controller and a deck operations officer, or DOO, sitting in Viper along with the aviation experts, so it's a big team. On somewhere as busy as a carrier flight day, the key to Viper's role is making sure aircraft
track of where aircraft went and what they were doing. At the same time, keeping tabs on the weather, the terrain, the ship's position, all the vessels, and all the air traffic, even birds in case of any risk to the controller traveler, depending on how far away they are from the ship. On the Ark Royal, in the 1970s, my job as a junior rating will have been to plot information onto this glass screen. Now, it's a lot more high-tech, and most of the controllers are senior rates.
This here is how the main briefing room on a 1970s carrier used to look. It was one of several briefing rooms on board. The others being used by individual squadrons. For example, the the anti-submarine helicopters would be one, while the strike jets would have been another. Everyone was on the same time as seconds count and a busy flight. This is also where one of the elite...
As it would have looked on a 1970s carrier, it's the place where the movements of all aircraft on board the ship were managed, right up to the minute they were launched and from the moment they were recovered. Reported. Everything to do with an aircraft was logged in its own F700. That's the folders you can see.
Hello and welcome to the Warfare Operations Room, the nerve centre of the ship during a war situation or when on exercise. As you see here, the ship would be closed up at action stations. My job as the captain would place me here to oversee everything that's going on and be on hand to make any decisions needed. The role of the ops room was, and still is, to look out for any threats, either in the air, on the surface, or below it. Detecting hostile aircraft, striking targets on land.
The ship was controlled, its course and speed. In other words, this was the driving seat. You might expect to find the captain up here, but he spent as much time down in the operations room as you've already seen. Instead, the immediate responsibility for the ship's safety sat with the officer of the watch. He would normally work a 4-hour watch, and there would be around 4 qualified officers on board to take turns on the bridge. The other people up here would be the navigator, or his deputy, who work out the ship's course.
So I came out into the sunshine and was greeted by these fantastic classic cars. And then after the next day at work, I travelled down to Cornwall to the great Charlestown.
He's only just started and he's already not turned up twice.
I was curious what was powering the pump, and so Charlestown's a really nice, well-kept place, and I went for a wander. There was some craft places that'll be a magnet for the ladies, different bars and eateries, ice cream, a lovely outdoor place to eat near the harbour. It was all very colourful and nice and interesting, I thought, and as I say, very well kept, well maintained. So I stayed in the Rashley Arms, which I stayed in the annex, and it was a great place, great view of the harbour from the first floor. The ensuite was probably the smallest I've ever stayed in, but the cheeky pint after a day's work was welcome. It was fantastic, and the restaurant was great. After the next day's work, I checked in at the Jamaica Inn just off the A30. Fantastic place. So here we are at the Jamaica Inn. Now, the last time I was at the Jamaica Inn, I slept in the car park over there, kind of in the middle of the shot, in a camper van, and that is a different episode. So please do watch it if you're interested. It was a very, very interesting night. It was very, very windy. I actually googled at one point in the middle of the night, can strong wind turn a camper van over? So that's the Cornwall trip part 1. If you'd like to watch it, it would be appreciated. Typical section of the A30 really, up and down long hills, testing the power of the car and the gear ratio. Oh, it's a nice nice residence lounge at the Jamaica Inn. I was pleased with the bedroom. I had a lot of work to do while I was there, and there was a decent desk, an interesting chair, and I loved the dog pictures on the wall. And the bathroom was great, and the general decor I thought was really nice. The rest of the hotel has lots of interesting history, of course, including the Daphne du Maurier Museum that joins on to the pub. Well, that's it for this episode. I'll leave you with my cheeky pint, and thank you for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye for now.